taken bold action after watching these criminal elements try to rip the history from the fabric of America.
Secretary of the Interior David Bernhardt is here.
A dangerous idea because we don't know how long immunity to this virus lasts.
And pandemic expert Dr. Dena Grayson is back to talk the latest updates on coronavirus.
And if you want to see what socialism looks like, we've seen it under this COVID crisis overreaction, I think, telling us what businesses are essential, which ones aren't.
Plus, White House Economic Revival Task Force member Jim DeMint joins me. That and so much more right now on America This Week, United We Stand. Welcome to America This Week, United We Stand. I'm Eric Bolling. America in the year 2020 feels like a movie, a horror film. States across the nation constantly seem to break daily infection records of coronavirus. Violent crime is spiking in our cities from coast to coast. It almost doesn't feel real, but folks, it is. Historic statues across the nation have been the center of both debates and violent protests. Now even Homeland Security has a police force protecting them. Joining me now to provide more insight is the Secretary of the Interior, David Bernhardt. Thank you so much, Secretary, for joining us. You are probably the most difficult person to book because everyone wants to talk to you. Tell us what's going on with the state of our statues in America and the police protections and the federal protections of our statues.
Well, let me be very clear and say the president has taken bold action after watching these criminal elements try to rip the history from the fabric of America. And the president has done two very significant things. The first thing he's done is basically given federal agencies like our own clear direction and a big notice to the criminals. And it goes like this: you mess with our statues and monuments, and your crimes will be completely investigated. The full force of the federal law will be brought to bear. The full power of the federal government will be brought to bear, and we will track you down, and we will prosecute you, and if we're successful, your penalties will be very, very severe, both criminally and civilly. He sent that clear direction, and then on top of that, he gave me the authority to have additional support at our nation's monuments and memorials to prevent this type of activity. On top of that, he's done something incredibly extraordinary, and that is he has said, beyond prosecuting, we need to reaffirm America's ideals and principles. We need to recognize that America's greatness stems from the sacrifices of the past and recognize the exceptional individuals who have contributed great things to America, whether it's philosophy and law or music and in the arts. And so he's designated a task force of federal agencies to work together to create a National Garden of American Heroes, also ensure that we're restoring and returning statues and monuments that are destroyed, and providing education about the fundamental ideals
Secretary,
that we embrace.
I want to get in here because I have a couple of questions. I don't have a lot of time. One of the questions, you talk about full force of the federal government and you know, in the penalty phase of this. What someone pulls down a statue, you got them clear, they're convicted of it. What type of penalty will they see?
Well, they can face up to 10 years in 10 years in federal prison for willfully destroying a statue. And look, these folks are very organized. They show up with tools, they show up with paraphernalia, they act in an organized manner. We will be able to demonstrate their intent. And so you're looking at 10 years jail time in a federal prison. That is not jaywalking.
Yeah. Sir, also, you know, are there any statues, let's be a little fair and unbiased here, are there any statues that are offensive and should be removed? Not pulled down, but removed. What are your thoughts?
Well, my view is that we have a whole host of monuments and memorials in America, and there is a process for determining whether people would like to modify a monument, put up a new one, or change it, or even get rid of it. And that process generally for stuff that we deal with, that process is Congress providing direction on what to do with a particular memorial or monument. That is the way our Constitution ensures that that people have a right to petition their government, and the government makes these decisions. It's important to recognize that most of these monuments were placed on the ground after careful deliberation by Congress and by similar acts. And so we certainly can modify monuments, we can talk about changing them, we can eliminate them, but we need to do it in a way that's lawful and not just simply by the mob or by Dave Bernhardt deciding to take one down. That's completely inappropriate.
Very, very quickly, sir, only about a half a minute or so. I will tell you, we do this thing on the show where people call in. I have a call-in number, and I get 400 or 500 phone calls a week. And anytime this topic comes up, it just explodes. People are so, I had no idea. Did you have any idea the amount of interest that the statues and the pulling downs of statues would generate?
So I am a firm believer that the president really is in sync with the American people. And the reality is that people are outraged as they watch our founding fathers ripped from our soil. That's completely inappropriate. It's not America, and America is responding to that.
All right,
and so is the president.
Secretary of the Interior, we appreciate your time. Also, by the way, we want to throw in there national parks. Man, what a place. Go out and visit those.
Absolutely.
That's under that man's jurisdiction as well. We have the best in the world. Go out and see a national park. Yep. David Bernhardt, thank you very much, Secretary.
Thank you.
Ahead on America This Week United We Stand, as schools across the country solidify plans for the fall, the non-COVID related health concern that has pediatricians worried. Next.
United we stand, we never fall. This perilous fight, it takes one and all. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand, America. United we stand. We stand, America. United we stand.
The debate over going back to school continues, and there's a hidden health concern pediatricians are very worried about. WKRC's medical reporter Liz Bonus shares an alarming new report on childhood vaccines.
So how you feeling about the school thing with all this?
I'm a little nervous.
Yeah.
Jennifer Young has 2 children headed to school this fall.
I think it's hard to say what's the best thing to do at this point, so you just go with it.
Her youngest, Barris, just 2. He's here today for something his pediatrician, Dr. Robin Gorman, says has fallen behind for many parents in this pandemic: well child checks. These also include updating school-required or recommended vaccines.
An outbreak of a vaccine-preventable illness in the setting of coronavirus would be very worrisome.
Dr. Gorman not the only one worried. This report from the Centers for Disease Control shows what Ohio public health specialist Greg Kesterman says his research shows as well.
So we have started to see vaccination numbers lower than where we'd expect them at this time of year. In fact, here at Hamilton County Public Health, our clinic is seeing numbers 54% less than they were in previous years.
The concern, of course, is that while the debate continues about getting kids back to school with coronavirus still circulating in many communities, other vaccine-preventable illnesses might be far more likely to get kids sick.
Measles, for example, if the vaccine rate in the community drops below 90 to 95%, there's a risk for outbreaks because herd immunity is not achieved. So that puts everyone at risk, especially vulnerable patients.
Part of the reason she said you can't just let these go is that there's a schedule for vaccines. That's the way it's researched, that's the way it's healthy, and that's the way they're most effective.
We have about a month before school starts in many instances, and now's the time to start scheduling your appointments with your primary care physicians. If you don't have insurance and you need vaccinations, you can work with your local health department, who will be able to provide those as well.
The immunity itself takes at least a couple of weeks to build up in the body after a vaccine, so you can't get shots the last few days before school begins, and go back to school without putting others at risk.
We are worried about outbreaks of things like measles or pertussis becoming a problem if we don't achieve high enough levels in the community to protect everyone.
A familiar lesson, you might say, we all now better understand as we see how quickly the virus COVID-19 has already spread outside the classroom. For America This Week, I'm medical reporter Liz Bonus reporting.
And thank you, Liz and WKRC, for that story. This week, Florida shattered the U.S. single-day record for new coronavirus cases. Here to discuss is pandemic expert Dr. Dena Grayson, and usually I think you're in Florida right now, Dr. Grayson, if I'm not mistaken. A couple of big numbers this week out of Florida. Again, I'm going to bring this up to you again. Coronavirus cases go up, but the death continues. The number of deaths continue to go down.
Well, Eric, as we've talked about, deaths are a lagging indicator. In fact, we are seeing the overall death rate in this country start to tick upwards. So what we were seeing before in the death rate was really dominated by the numbers coming out of New York and New Jersey. It takes time for people to get really sick, go in the ICU, and then succumb to the virus. And just as, I predicted on the show a few weeks ago, as you recall, I said, look, what's going to come next, Eric, is we're going to see those hospitalizations start to go up. The ICUs are going to start getting filled. And then we'll start seeing that death rate go up. And that's exactly, unfortunately, what we're seeing.
Well, we're not. Doc, and you're the expert.
Yeah, we are.
But I'm a numbers expert.
Are.
We're not seeing the death rate go up. We're seeing the death rate go down. Number of deaths may be ticking up, but as we know, the actual positives are exploding, and the deaths are only ticking up a little. That means that the death rate, mortality of this virus, is actually shrinking.
Well, it's not, Eric. We don't know that because, first of all, it's death is a lagging indicator. So the cases that are diagnosed today, on average, it takes weeks for someone to die from the virus if they're going to die. Now, there's some good news, bad news here. I agree with you that initially, the first wave in this next wave of the outbreak, if you will, or next peak of the outbreak, was in younger people. But unfortunately, in a very ominous sign and very predictable, we're now seeing infections in older people. So and those are folks that to get sicker, hospitalized, ICU, and have a higher chance of dying. So now the good news here is that yes, doctors are better at treating folks with this virus, but it is way too early to say, hey, that mortality rate has ticked down. It is way, way, way too early, Eric.
Just by the numbers, Doc. I'm not opinionizing, not throwing any opinion spin on this at all. Mm-hmm. It literally is, with the cases going up, positivity going up, and the number of deaths flat to up a little. That is a tick down in mortality rate of this virus. I mean, it's just pure numbers. Doc, let's talk.
No, it's too early though. Let's talk in a month.
Well, okay, fair enough. We will, and we will. Let's talk about this vaccine, the potential vaccine. Moderna came out, and the stock market jumped, and everything was great. How confident are we so far on this potential vaccine?
Well, Eric, the data are very promising with the Moderna vaccine. And there's another vaccine as well from the University of Oxford, very similar kind of technology using RNA, essentially mimicking kind of the virus to use your body's own cells to then make the protein that you then immunizes you. So based upon the early data, very encouraging. All the data are very encouraging. I think that there's a good chance for success, but this is an unproven technology, an unproven approach for vaccines. So the proof is going to be in this big phase 3 trial that will be starting within the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, and we need to point out this phase 2 trial was younger people, and there's fewer younger people. Phase 3 is going to be, I think, 30,000 higher risk people. So that should be I guess, an indicator whether this vaccine is going to work. I have friends who are literally out there saying, I have the antibody, which means I had COVID-19. I have the antibody. And they're like, yay, I can go do whatever I want. Bad idea?
Well, it's a dangerous idea because we don't know how long immunity to this virus lasts. First of all, it's never been proven that if you test positive for the antibody that you're immune to the virus. Now, most of us, myself included, think it's likely. However, it's not clear how long those antibodies last. And what we have seen is that patients sometimes that have recovered from this virus, that after 3 months, 4 months, the antibodies wane and they're gone. So, you may have antibodies today, but next week you may not. So I think that everyone needs to be pretty cautious and act as though, hey, this is not an immunity ticket or anything like that.
Yeah, immunity ticket. I get the pun right there. Doc, we're going to let it go. We'll leave it right there. We ran out of time. But again, this is an odd virus. It changes by the day, by the minute sometimes. A lot of times an antibody for a virus can last the whole lifetime. And as you point out, this one may not be the case. Dr. Dena, appreciate your time as always.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
So many state and local officials around the country are facing a similar story. Law enforcement is dealing with not one, but two deadly battles: the coronavirus and violence on the streets. The last 2 weeks, cities large and small have experienced a rash of violence. Here's Sinclair national correspondent Christine Frizzau now with more.
Another tragic weekend in Chicago, a city seeing a 39% increase in murders from this time last year, with law enforcement there perplexed on how to proceed.
From 6 p.m. Friday through 11:59 Sunday, there were 50 shooting incidents, 64 shooting victims, and 11 murders.
New York City is experiencing at least a 50% increase in its murder rate. The mayor recently slashing $1 billion from its police budget as the department is seeing a more than 400% increase in police retirements.
Far-left mayors are escalating the anti-cop crusade, and violent crime is spiraling in their cities.
President Trump trying to flip the script, holding an event for those positively impacted by law enforcement, including Sarah Bohan. She says police found her missing son Spencer in 12 minutes.
He is autistic nonverbal and doesn't really have sense of danger. So when he goes missing, it's like life or death.
As violence rises this summer, so too do calls for more police accountability.
Open up all the cases!
With a police reform stalled on Capitol Hill and protesters continuing their demands for action.
Unfortunately, these are not isolated incidents. It's systemically happening and needs to stop.
With more and more documented cases of police misconduct, there are growing calls to reform or even defund police. At the same time, many cities are seeing a spike in murders. Here in Washington, D.C., the homicide rate is up 23% from this time last year. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser has shown sympathy for demands for police reforms, but also says policing is essential to safe communities.
As long as we're investing in good community-based policing, that we have our officers trained and equipped, that we're training them in de-escalation techniques, and that they represent our city.
Major challenges not only for big cities, but even smaller ones like Rochester, New York, one of many parts of this country navigating a new landscape of violence. For America This Week, I'm Christine Frizzau.
Coming up on America This Week, United We Stand, he's a member of the White House Economic Revival team and the author of a new book, Saving America from Socialism. Jim DeMint joins me next. You don't want to miss this. And I'd like to take a minute to preview an upcoming event I'm doing right after taping this show. I'm headed to California-Mexico border with the U.S. drug czar. We'll do a flyover of the border, and also we'll be going into the tunnels the drug traffickers are using to bring illegal drugs into America. I'll have the cameras rolling the whole time. This is part of a series I'm producing and hosting. The series is focusing on real America. I'll be bringing you video you won't see anywhere else and talking to people not used to being in front of a camera. Some of our show topics range from the war on drugs, to inside NASCAR, where we'll go into the garages and the pits to show you how NASCAR, America's most popular spectator sport, has been dealing with life without their fans. And we also have Cuba circled on the map. The island just 90 miles off our shore is one of our most complicated foreign relationships. I'll be sitting down with the Cuban government to discuss the future of U.S.-Cuba relations. I have a lot more of these specials in the works, and we'll bring some of the content to you here. Also, you can go to ericbolling.com for more, and by all means, subscribe to my Eric Bolling YouTube channel.
United we stand, we never fall. This perilous fight, it takes one and all. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time.
We stand American strong.
United we stand.
We stand American strong.
City by city,
America This Week, America's fastest growing political show, points out how rough and tumble politics shape opinion in every region in our country. We tell American stories, stories that touch our people, determine our politics, focus on the future of America.
I'm Eric Bolling. Join me for a fascinating look at America This Week. This week, former Vice President Joe Biden delivered a speech outlining his plan to rebuild the economy, which also heavily leans on a focus on combating climate change. Joining me now to discuss is White House Economic Revival Task Force member and former South Carolina Senator Jim DeMint, also a good friend of mine for a long time. Senator, tell us about the, let's focus in on Biden's economic plan. What are your thoughts?
Well, it relates to what I've been talking about all week, my new book, Saving America from Socialism. If you look at the plan, certainly if you read between the lines, Eric, this is a plan to move America towards socialism, higher taxes, more government control, more regulations. And if you want to see what socialism looks like, we've seen it under this COVID crisis overreaction, I think, telling us what businesses are essential, which ones aren't, where we can go, who we can meet with. There's just I think there's enough out there to sound the alarm. This election is going to be key.
And what, I watch, and I've been a student of the economy for many years, many decades, in fact. I started my television career talking about the economy, a financial analyst on TV after 20 years on Wall Street. I'm blown away at the resilience of the economy. It's just, I can't believe some of it. We've seen a recession, we've seen unemployment, double-digit unemployment, and yet it keeps bouncing back. What do you attribute that to, sir?
Well, I think people want to get back to work. I was talking to a car dealer who had been closed down in California and opened up despite the governor's restrictions, and they had the best month they'd ever had in the history because people were ready to come out and shop. Now, we've lost some businesses we're not going to get back, and I think it's going to take a while to get back to below 5% of employment. But people in America want to work, they want to shop, they want to make things. And if we just stop suffocating this economy and open it back up, we wouldn't need these giant stimulus plans to get the economy going.
Well, you bring up a stimulus plan. There's another one around the corner. When I'm looking at a stock market it's basically almost back to where it was prior to COVID. How many more? And the reason why I'm asking this, sir, is you and I are fiscal conservatives, staunch fiscal conservatives. We have to kind of hold our nose when we say, okay, another $1 trillion in stimulus. How many more waves of stimulus are we going to need?
Well, it makes me particularly sad, Eric, because I had so many fights with Republicans and Democrats trying to save a few $1 million. And now suddenly the faucets are open and we're spending trillions. But worse than just spending and borrowing, Eric, is what's happening here. The Federal Reserve is adding to their balance sheet, expanding the monetary supply, but we know it's printing money. And the market is looking fairly good because the feds are out there buying a lot of bad debt from the big banks and keeping liquidity out there. But this is just like keeping the economy going on steroids. We can't keep propping it up with this fake spending. We've got to let Americans get back to work.
I agree with that. And we got to open the economy. I know there's a lot of, health risks to it, and those things need to be considered. But you got to get, it's America. We got to get this engine running again. My concern, sir, is we're adding trillions upon trillions of dollars of debt. I mean, conservatives like you and I blasted Obama for doubling the debt in his 8 years, and we might just do it again.
We might, and I'm real proud of Trump. I think he's accomplished a lot of things. He's got the right idea on less regulation, less taxes, but the spending, he's got to begin to speak out against it. I know from being in the House and the Senate myself that spending bills come from Congress, and the president either signs them or he shuts the government down, which he's already had to do one time. Yeah. So we need to push our congressmen and senators, Eric. But most of all, we need to realize that what's in front of us right now is a choice between free markets in socialism. And if Americans don't understand what socialism is,
that's right.
They need to find out.
That's right, Senator Jim DeMint. That's right. We got to get away from that hump, that concern of the pit of socialism. Once we get past that, 100% agree with you. Let's cut back on some of that spending. Senator Jim DeMint, thank you very much.
Thanks, Eric.
Be sure to set your DVR so you don't miss a minute of America This Week or United We Stand. To find out when we air in your city, check out the list at the top of our Facebook page. Go to facebook.com/America Bowling, all one word. So if you missed the show or want to rewatch an interview, subscribe to our channel there. We're also putting all of our shows on YouTube.
United we stand, we never fall. This perilous fight, it takes one and all. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time.
We stand America.
United we stand.
We stand America.
United we stand.
Well, that's a wrap from the D.C. Swamp. Thank you for joining me for another fantastic episode of America This Week, United We Stand. While we had the Secretary of Interior, David Bernhardt, on tonight, and while we spoke about statues, the Department of the Interior also oversees our beautiful national park system. Tonight, we leave you with a video posted by Nick Fowler from the blog Parks and Trek. Views from the top of the Grand Teton National Park. Have a great night, everybody.